Welcome back to Skytech-Lens. Today we're diving into a crisis shaking the core of American manufacturing. General Motors, once a symbol of stability, now facing a storm of tariffs, shifting markets, and global pressures. Over 50,000 jobs are at stake. This isn't just about profits, it's about families, communities, and the future of American industry. You've seen the headlines, GM shutdowns, thousands laid off. But what's really happening behind the scenes? It all began with a single policy decision, a tariff. Meant to protect American jobs, but now threatening the very livelihoods it aimed to save. The fallout is rippling through the entire auto industry, from Detroit to Seoul. In this video, we'll unravel how tariffs triggered a multi-billion-dollar crisis, visit towns where factories have gone dark, and explore GM's high-stakes bet on electric vehicles. We'll hear from workers caught in the middle, and examine the clash between political promises and economic reality. Buckle up. Let's get into the real story behind GM's shutdowns. It started with a 25% tariff on imported steel, aluminum, and auto parts. The idea: make foreign goods pricier, push companies to buy and build American and protect jobs. But for GM, a global company, this was a billion-dollar blow. Modern cars are built from thousands of parts sourced worldwide. GM's supply chain is a finely tuned global machine. Overnight, tariffs sent costs soaring. GM estimated $1 billion lost each year. Not from bad sales, but from policy. That money had to come from somewhere. Less for R&D, less for new tech, and less to cover production. Prices for everything, from screws to transmissions, jumped. GM tried to pass costs to consumers, but in a competitive market, there's only so much you can raise prices before buyers walk away. So the company turned inward, slashing costs. Unprofitable car lines, especially small sedans, became impossible to justify. Switching to domestic suppliers wasn't easy. Many parts simply aren't made in the US, and finding new suppliers takes years. The tariffs were meant to boost American manufacturing, but the market couldn't adapt fast enough. GM was squeezed, rising costs on one side, price limits on the other. The result? A cascade of tough decisions, tightened budgets, canceled projects, and a shift from growth to survival. The billion-dollar wedge didn't just hurt GM's bottom line, it set off a chain reaction that would soon hit factory floors across the country. Every department felt the squeeze, and the focus shifted from innovation to cost-cutting. The tariffs, intended to protect, became a slow-acting poison, destabilizing one of America's biggest manufacturers. This wasn't a single event, but a grinding process, one that would soon lead to dramatic shutdowns and layoffs. The story of GM's crisis is the story of how a simple policy can spiral into a complex disaster. The company's careful balance was shattered, and the fallout was just beginning. The next chapter, where the production lines actually stopped. Let's see what happened when the numbers turned into real-world consequences. The impact was about to get personal. The financial pressure from tariffs found its outlet in factory shutdowns, decisions that devastated entire communities. Lordstown, Ohio, Detroit Hamtramck, Michigan, Oshawa, Ontario. These weren't just plants, they were the economic lifeblood of their towns. When GM announced unallocation, it meant one thing: the line was stopping. Lordstown, once home to over 4,500 workers building the Chevy Cruze, was the first to fall. Tariffs made the already thin margins on small cars unsustainable. In March 2019, the last Cruze rolled off the line. The gates closed. Thousands were left scrambling for what's next. The impact rippled outward. Suppliers, truckers, local diners, realtors. For every job lost inside, several more vanished outside. Property values dropped, families moved away, communities fractured. Detroit Hamtramck faced a similar fate. The city, synonymous with the auto industry, felt betrayed as its own foundations cracked. GM cited shifting consumer tastes, SUVs over sedans, but tariffs accelerated the cuts, making some models impossible to keep. The shutdowns weren't just about market trends, they were a direct response to a financial crisis triggered by trade policy. On the final days, workers who'd spent decades on the line said goodbye to colleagues who felt like family. The sense of loss was profound. Anger, sadness, and uncertainty filled the air. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They were empty lunchrooms, for sale signs, and silent assembly lines. The production didn't just slow, it stopped, leaving a vacuum in towns that once thrived on the hum of industry. The real cost of tariffs was measured in lost livelihoods and broken communities. The story of GM's shutdowns is a story of unintended consequences, felt most deeply by those who could least afford it. The next challenge: GM's risky bet on an all-electric future. Could it save the company? or make things worse. Let's find out how America's EV gamble collided with cold consumer reality. The stakes were about to get even higher. Amid the chaos, GM doubled down on electric vehicles, investing billions in a bold pivot to an all-EV future. The plan launched new models like the Hummer EV, Cadillac Lyriq and Chevy Bolt, and lead the next automotive revolution. But reality hit hard. GM lost federal EV tax credits, making their cars $7,500 pricier than competitors. Tariffs made things worse. Key EV components like batteries and electronics, mostly sourced from Asia, became much more expensive. The EV division was already a cash drain, and now costs soared even higher. With no tax credits and higher prices, GM's electric cars struggled to compete. Mainstream buyers hesitated, worried about range, charging, and cost. Dealerships filled with unsold EVs, production delays and glitches piled up. The dream of a smooth transition to electric was replaced by a grim struggle for survival. Profitable gas trucks and SUVs kept GM afloat, but those were the very vehicles squeezed by tariffs and slated for phase-out. GM was trapped, a shrinking past, and a future not yet ready. Less profit from gas cars meant less investment for EVs, slowing progress and weakening their position. The vicious cycle threatened GM's big bet on the future. The EV revolution sputtered, caught between policy, timing, and a market not ready to change. The company's survival depended on breaking this cycle, but the odds were stacked against them. The next battle: workers, unions, and the politics of nationalism. How did those on the front lines respond when promises collided with pink slips? Let's take a closer look. In the middle of this storm were the workers and their unions, caught between political promises and harsh reality. Tariffs were sold as America First, a way to protect jobs. Many workers wanted to believe. The United Auto Workers, UAW, had long criticized free trade, hoping tariffs might finally help. But as plants closed, hope turned to anger. The very policy meant to save jobs was now blamed for their loss. Workers weren't losing jobs to Mexico, they were losing them because parts had become too expensive to assemble cars in the US. The disconnect was stark. Political rallies celebrated tariffs, while union members packed up their lockers. The UAW protested, demanding GM keep plants open and fighting for severance and transfers. But the economic headwinds made their demands harder to meet. Inside the plants, blame was divided. Some accused GM of using tariffs as cover for cost-cutting, others blamed politicians for broken promises. The lack of unity made a strong response difficult. Political rhetoric only deepened frustration. Layoffs were dismissed as temporary, ignoring the real link between policy and closures. For workers, nationalist slogans offered no comfort when the paychecks stopped. The result: prolonged unemployment, forced relocations, and broken communities. The promise of job security through nationalism had backfired, leaving deep scars and cynicism. In a globalized economy, the line between helping and hurting proved dangerously thin. The next ripple: how GM's crisis spread across the entire auto industry. GM's crisis didn't happen in isolation. The entire auto industry felt the shockwaves. Stellantis, parent of Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, faced the same pressures: rising costs, squeezed profits, and tough choices about production. Foreign automakers like Volvo and Hyundai, with US plants, were caught in the crossfire. Volvo's new South Carolina plant was hit by both US tariffs on parts and retaliatory tariffs from China, threatening exports and profits. Hyundai's Alabama hub faced higher costs, forcing tough decisions on pricing and output. The dream of seamless global manufacturing was disrupted by the very country these companies invested in. Suppliers were hit hardest. Orders slashed, price concessions demanded, many pushed to the brink. The global supply chain, built on decades of partnership, began to crack. Internationally, GM Korea, a key hub for small vehicles, faced its own crisis as tariffs made exports to the US more expensive. Restructuring, layoffs, and tense union talks followed. A policy meant to protect American jobs threatened workers from South Carolina to South Korea. The lesson: in a global economy, a disruption in one corner is felt everywhere. The result was industry-wide anxiety, delayed investments, and a destabilized global auto sector. GM's drama was just the most visible symptom of a much bigger problem. With factories dark and workers in limbo, the big question: can the assembly lines restart, and when? The answer depends on trade policy, consumer demand, and GM's strategy. Best-case tariffs are rolled back, costs drop, and GM can invest in both gas and electric vehicles. Demand rebounds and jobs return, maybe even to shuttered plants. Worst-case tariffs stay, costs rise, and GM contracts further. More closures, more layoffs, and a permanent decline in American manufacturing. Most likely, a slow, painful adjustment. Some tariffs ease, but not all. GM pivots to EVs cautiously, focusing on profitable trucks and SUVs. The fate of closed plants is uncertain. Some, like Lordstown, are repurposed for startups. Others, like Detroit Hamtramck, are retooled for EVs but may never reach past employment levels. The future will likely be a patchwork of smaller operations, not a return to the glory days. Key factors: politics, the economy, and how fast consumers embrace EVs. GM doesn't control all the variables. The line can restart, but it may look very different. More automation, fewer workers, new locations, and new products. The road ahead is uncertain, shaped by decisions in Washington and Detroit. The fate of GM will help define the future of American manufacturing for a generation. The next chapter is unwritten, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The story isn't over, but the choices made now will echo for years. What happens next will shape not just GM but the entire industry. The world is watching. The next move is critical. Let's see where the road leads. That's the story of GM's shutdown drama. A single decision triggering a cascade of consequences. Over 50,000 jobs on the line, a multi-billion-dollar bet on electric vehicles, and global ripples. No easy answers, no simple villains, just the clash of politics, economics, and real lives. The future of GM, its workers, and American manufacturing is uncertain. What do you think? Are tariffs helping or hurting? Will GM's electric gamble pay off? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. If you found this video insightful, hit like and subscribe for more deep dives. Thanks for watching a video. Subscribe the channel now for more updates.